Welcome to the Dog Expert Podcast, the podcast dogs would want you to listen to. Powered by canineprinciples.com, helping passionate dog people go from feeling unsure and overwhelmed to confident, compassionate and science savvy through a rich library of online courses and formal qualifications. Each week on the podcast, we dive deep into the real, raw and rewarding world of dogs. This isn't about obedience. This is about understanding. Because dogs aren't problems to solve. They're free-thinking, sentient beings to connect with. Hello, good evening and welcome back to the Dog Expert Podcast. We are on season 4, episode 6, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Penny, Dr. Zoolittle. Hi, Penny.
Hi, Joe. I know you have been on tiptoes looking forward to this episode today. A few messages of excitement going backwards and forwards. I have to confess, it's one of my favorite people to speak with as well. So I'm totally with you on what we're going to talk about today.
Oh, I have been so excited. Our guest this evening is someone who I have admired for many, many years. And I was absolutely over the moon when you reached out and managed to secure a conversation with Caroline for me, what 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago now. And I just felt like, you know, and you feel like you just already know someone when you speak to them. It was very much like
so
that.
Natural and yeah.
So much in common, and just such a wonderful, genuine, lovely human being. So I know we're not just saying that because she's backstage listening in, although if you want to pay us later, Caroline, you're welcome to, but I'm going to, with no further ado, welcome the wonderful Caroline Ingraham to the podcast. Thank you for joining us, Caroline.
Well, thank you, Joe and Penny, for inviting me to talk about this work, and it's really exciting to be here. Thank you for your very nice introduction there.
So I haven't told anyone much about what you actually do, because I think no one can explain it as well as you. So shall we start with what you're doing now and what led you to this point?
Okay, so what I'm doing now, I guess it's sort of what I've always been doing for the last 40 years. It's just I've gained a lot more experience from when I began. It's all about animal self-medication. So it's all about offering different plant remedies to animals to bring themselves back into health, be it one's based on behavior, or if it's based on a physical problem, or sometimes the behavior is to do with a physical problem. And we can get so much information by what the animal selects. So it began about 4 decades ago, 40 years ago, and I was training in essential oils, and I was pretty blown away with how they helped me. And I was quite skeptical when I went into class, and I sort of came down with a UTI, and Tisserand said to me, "Oh, great, we can use you as a guinea pig." And I remember thinking, well, actually, better be quick, because if I don't get antibiotics, then it's just going to go out of control. And I have ended up in hospital with it. So anyway, he put me on the massage table, muscle tested me, which kinesiology, and I came up with 3 different oils: sandalwood, yarrow, and juniper. And he massaged them on my back. And this was quite an important learning curve, what happens next, because he massaged them on my back, and it was like somebody erasing the pain. But the next day, I kind of, even though the pain wasn't in my back, I kind of felt that if I did something wrong, like look at a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, it would come back. And And he said, how are you? And I said, well, yeah, I feel like sort of hanging in there, but the pain has gone from my back. And he said, put 2 drops of juniper in hot water and drink it. And I did. And it was amazing. It just lifted and it never came back. Well, it did come back actually when I was 45. I'm talking about I was 23 at the time and lived with cystitis pretty much. And so what I learned from this, I mean, luckily I trained in essential oils before there were any rules and regs. I was the second course ever in essential oils in the UK. And so there was no red tape. So you could take it by mouth. So, and the juniper smell, absolutely divine. And it taught me that when it was applied topically for this particular condition, it wasn't strong enough to really knock it on the head. And so I would have had to go and get antibiotics because nothing else seemed to work. And I tried everything. But because I got the right dose, I didn't need the antibiotics. And that was hugely important. And this is where I sort of trailblaze at the moment and probably go, not within the constraints of classical aromatherapy. I wouldn't even consider myself as aromatherapy. It's animal self-medication. So it's all about taste and smell. And what I noticed was juniper smelled divine when I needed it. And it didn't smell so great when I didn't. And that's when the light bulb moment began to flicker. And then I found myself on my own path, my own journey, sort of walking in a completely different direction from the rest of my classmates. And then I thought, oh my God, I wonder how this works with dogs. And I just rescued a dog from Battersea Dogs Home who was off her food. And so I tried it with her. She was called Roxy. And I didn't really know what I was doing, not like I do now. And so I thought, well, she's very fearful and frankincense is for fear. So I offered her some frankincense and she sniffed it. And I think at that time, which I wouldn't work like this now, but I just put a little bit in some vegetable oil. I don't use vegetable oil if I'm going to apply it topically. If it's a safe oil, it's very often undiluted. But if it's an irritating oil, then, and it depends on the area and it depends on the condition. And then I put it in aloe vera just because it's hair and oily is not so good. And so anyway, I put it in some vegetable oil and put some on her belly. And she hadn't eaten at Battersea Dogs Home. And in those days, they allowed dogs to go home be rehomed after 7 days, even if they hadn't eaten for 7 days. It's very different today. Anyway, she literally got up and ate her food. She was with me and hadn't eaten as well. And I got the vet out and he said, why did you get such a sick dog? She was a German Shepherd. And I said, she was so sweet. And she got up and he didn't really know what was wrong. I just think it must be very emotional what was going on, because she literally got up and ate her food and I was blown away. I thought, oh my God, these are amazing. These are miracles in bottles. And I wanted to tell the world about them then. Now, I'm 66 now. So I was 24 then. So it's sort of taken all this time to really perfect what I'm doing, to be able to answer questions very confidently and be able to explain why an animal would poison themselves, because people will say to me, oh yeah, it's so great self-medication. Why do we hear of dogs eating chocolate, or why do we hear of them eating grapes? And I can explain all of that now. So anyway, my work took me on a journey from there of learning, and the horses became my next teachers because they were so easy to read, much more so than dogs, because dogs, you've got all the different breeds and the different physiologies and different nose lengths, and which all make a difference to how the receptors, to how they work with oils, whereas horses were really easy teachers. And I learned a lot from them. And then from there, I took that information into the dog world. And here I am today, all these years later.
Thank
And
goodness.
it's gone from strength to strength. It wasn't easy. When you're going against the grain at the beginning, I was not in line with the aromatherapy essential oil world. And, it looked like I was breaking all the, boundaries of, especially when the rules and regs came in. And I thought, well, actually, I'm not doing aromatherapy. I'm doing self-medication. This is all about animals and people selecting what they need by taste and smell. And then when I heard about the word zoopharmacognosy, it was much later on, because I used to describe myself as animal aromatics. I used to think, well, that's the only way I can really think of describing what I'm doing. And then when I heard about the word zoopharmacognosy, which got introduced in the 90s, I thought, oh my God, that's what I'm doing. And that was an academic crowd who was studying chimps self-medicating. And I thought, oh my God, I'm doing exactly what they're doing. It's just that I'm bringing it to the animals, the remedies. And so that would then give the title Applied Zoopharmacognosy. So zoopharmacognosy, as we know it, is animal self-medication in the wild, was I'm bringing the remedies to the animals so they can self-medicate. And then in early 2000, we had Jack de Rhodes, and he began studying insect self-medication. I mean, he's a professor in America. And it's amazing to think how precise insects are at self-medicating. And I just say this really quickly, because I think if you can accept or understand or know that caterpillars can self-medicate, you're not going to question your dog as much or yourself, because they don't seem as complex as the other animals. And this is how sophisticated this mechanism is that if they're infested with fly larvae, they select plants rich in iridoid glucosides. But if they're selected with wasp larvae, it's plants rich in alkaloids. Now, both of these constituents are highly toxic if they're not needed, but there's no harm to the caterpillar. It kills the eggs that have been laid inside the caterpillar, which would eaten the caterpillar from inside out. And once the eggs have been deactivated and died, then the caterpillar goes back to its normal foraging. So if nature has this perfection with the insects, and there's a lot of research on that, and papers, academic papers on insect self-medication, which is called pharmacophagy.
Wow, absolutely fascinated. I never thought about insects self-medicating. It never even occurred to me in a million dreams. In a million dreams? I don't even know if that's a saying. It's now.
Well, hey, it's a good one.
If anyone watching's got any questions or listening has got any questions for Caroline or anything that you want to share, I mean, I shared a couple of stories at the end of last week's episode about how Caroline's work through someone that she trained helped a couple of dogs that I've come into contact with. But if anyone's got anything that they want to share in the comments, please do. If you're watching or listening after this live recording, then please do comment and we'll make sure that we come back to you all. Penny, I know that you've worked with Caroline, you've studied with Caroline, and you're a big fan of her work as well. Do you want to share a bit more about your journey into exploring this side of things?
Well, sure. So I was in undergrad studying zoology and animal behaviour at Melbourne University back in Australia, and came across a book. It wasn't one of Caroline's, I have to say at this point, but it was a book that talked about wild health, and this captivated. Yes. So, yeah. I mean, I after I read this and after some time had gone on, I did actually reach out to the author and connected with her and had a conversation as well, because it was just so. It just captivated every part of of what I was seeking to do, to understand the animal mind, to make friends with the animals, to help the animals, to work with natural things with the animals, to take their wisdom on board, to allow them to have agency, and to accelerate the healing process, because the least amount of time spent suffering is going to be the best thing for the animal. And so, but that was the only thing I could find at that point. Like, it wasn't part of my course or syllabus. I just was going systematically through the zoology bookshelf in the subsection that I was interested in inside the zoology library at the university. So every week I'd just go in and I'd get another book off the shelf, and I'd go home and I'd read that one that week, and then come back and get the next one, and just systematically went through the shelf to learn. So that was kind of my hobby, going through university. So that's where I first encountered this. And then I'd moved across to the UK. I was working with a zoo here. Well, I'm not here there now, but anyway, in the UK, and then met Terry Hill with her zebras. And I was working alongside her for a couple, and she said, have you heard of this thing, zoopharmacognosy? And I was like, well, oh my gosh, I have. I had no idea that, you could do that with zebras, right? For whatever reason, I don't know, because the book is really talking a lot about in the wild. So I hadn't really thought about the applied application. I hadn't come across that. So anyway, I watched Terry do an example. Terry had studied with Caroline. She told me about Caroline. She showed me Caroline's book, and we did a little session with the zebra. And I, like Caroline's, when you see it for the first time, you are just blown away by how simple it can be when you know what your job as the human is, right? Because you don't get complicated, you don't get smart about it. You allow the wisdom of the animal and their needs to prevail. So you check your ego at the door and come in with a model of service to say, how could I set you free from the suffering or whatever you're experiencing right now, or just something that you want to experience for fun, for pleasure, right? Let me intelligently offer you some things that could be the right scenario, and then you tell me. And then it was, so at that point I was like, right, I'm bringing up Caroline like literally the next day, right, to say, I need to study with you because this is game changer stuff.
Oh, that's perfectly said. Yeah, it's you're absolutely right. It is that collaboration between you and the animal. You're working together, and it's very much, how can I help you, and giving the animal agency, which is amazing. And then when they realize they have choice, that's when the magic begins, because normally they've been collars held onto, whether it's off the shelf or pharmaceuticals, it's applied to them. They have no choice. And if they try to struggle, they're held on a little tighter because it's going to be applied. So why would they communicate with us when they're not heard? Now, when they realize, when they're taking medicinal remedies, when they realize that we're actually listening and we're respecting their choice, they begin to work with you, and it's incredible. And so, that if they're, say you're offering something topically, maybe musculoskeletal, you've got some peppermint or birch and wintergreen, and you're going down their back, and you're looking at their facial expression. And so when they move away, you stop. When they push into you, you apply more. When you see the really relaxed look on their face, when you get to the exact point, and they might begin to mouth and eyes will go heavy, and then you put more on until the eyes begin to open. And then when the eyes begin to open and say, oh, okay, I've had enough now, you stop, and they think, oh my God, this person's communicating with me. And so therefore I can communicate back, because they're going to be heard. And it's absolutely incredible. The amount of people that have said how strong the bond is with their animals since they've been doing this. And it's also, if you're offering an oil for inhalation, and if the animal turns away, if you're sort of following it, that might be a bit too strong for the animal because it's turned away, but it just might need strong. And then I put an oil here so you can see. So they might need, I get my dose, and I just need to dilute it a little bit. I'm not finished with it, but I just need to dilute it. Okay, now because it's got to go around my body, absorb where it's needed. Now I'm going to come back some more. And then, okay. And then it's like topping up. It's like sipping a glass of wine, you're not having it all together all at one time. And there is a time sometimes when they've turned away and they're working with it and they've been like that for a couple of minutes. You can actually then go in very slowly and say, actually, do you want a stronger dose? And they're like, oh yeah, okay. And then they do, because sometimes they will build up to increase their dose. But if you followed them straight away, it's very often too strong and they get up and walk away and you think, oh, I didn't need that. And then you've missed something that's really needed. And the thing is that these are really potent to animals and dogs. They've got all those nasal receptors. So a lot of olfactory receptors to be taking in a large dose. And, and for a dog, it's almost like inhalation is almost like, internal for a horse. That's the sort of type of strength difference, because one's a herbivore, they work very differently, they have a different enzymatic physiology. Occasionally a dog will want to lick an essential oil, but it's only very specific oils, and it's usually if the condition is more advanced, and it's usually a certain breed. And so there is a science and a study to this to perfect one's outcome, and also to get to the oils that are that match that individual. Because the more you can match those oils to that individual, the less oils you're offering that they might not need. So if they don't need an oil, and if you think of them as medicines, which they are, then you're offering them through smell and medicine that might not be suited to them. So they might get a little bit, oh, what are you doing? But so if you can sort of get, if your dog's got gut problems, then let's go to the gut oils first. And if you haven't got it quite right, and say it's peppermint instead of fennel or vice versa, then because the peppermint will be having some effect, but you might, if it's meant to be fennel, you're going to get even more of a reaction with fennel. And so you're finely tuning. So it's sort of like us, we might be more suited if it was pharmaceuticals to aspirin to ibuprofen, or vice versa. But if there's no aspirin or Anodin, and that's our niche medication, we'll take the second best. So the dog will take the second best. But I suppose the training is to really understand what you're offering and where to begin, and how to not offer too many oils that aren't needed. And sometimes people say, oh, why don't you just put the oils all out in one go? Well, just imagine if there's sort of a medicinal oil that's not needed, one that is, and they're all floating into each other, because they are so strong and they are so potent. They, initially, until you really understand what your dog's needing, they have to be offered one at a time, and then you can blend their chosen oils together. Having a response where they inhale an oil, walk away, lay down. I've never known a case where that's not going to be their key oil. And a lot of people will go, oh, they don't really like that, walked away and lay down. And I just tell you a case that came up recently, Pseudomonas bacteria. So a dog, Molly, 8.5 years old, she was going to be put to sleep because she had multi-drug resistance to Pseudomonas bacteria. She had to have a whole of her ear canal removed. It was removed, and the Pseudomonas came back, and she was resistant to every single antibiotic. And so the vets called me up and said, look, is there anything you can do to help Molly? And I said, okay. So I got 5 oils that I knew were effective against Pseudomonas, and I offered them to Molly in the vet surgery. I mean, I was online, but I was getting the vet to offer them. And when Molly inhaled garlic, I mean, she came to it several times. It was the last of what I offered her. She came to it backwards and forwards, and then went and lay down. And I knew that was the key oil. Her second key oil was oregano. And the story is on my website, and you'll see the ear is huge. I mean, the opening was massive, like this. And it was bright red. And I was thinking, oh God, garlic, which is an irritant, and oregano on this bright red ear. And it's like, but, I know it's going to kill the bacteria. Put it in green clay, which will be a really good base. So packed on masses of green clay. And within 3 days, the infection had completely cleared. Within 2.5 weeks, and you'll see the photo on my website, the ear had completely closed. And if they had got on top of the infection, it would have taken to close the ear 4 to 6 weeks, and sometimes months. So it was, they were amazed. And the veterinary surgery then paid for her to do the course. And actually wrote to the RCVS to say, this work is amazing. And then I worked with her cat, and her cat had really cystitis most of its life, and wasn't responding to antibiotics. And I thought, well, maybe it's stress-related cystitis. Didn't choose valerian, almost ran off the chair. And I thought, oh dear, I hope we don't lose her attention, because I'm offering her an oil that she's not liking. And, we got onto the antibacterials, bitter almond, garlic, I think it was too, which she inhaled. And it cured straight. She said, oh my God, I've got the story again up on my website. She's not using her litter box. It's never happened. She's prancing around like a young kitten. I've never seen that before. And she said, why is this not being used in the veterinary surgeries? And this is a vet who was a little bit more old school old school vet. And she's absolutely blown away. And she did actually say it gave her a renewed faith, really. She was feeling a little bit sometimes with her hands tied with veterinary medicine. And I have another vet on my course called Brett. And he used to be a London vet, but now he lives in South Africa. And all of his clinic is, now he just does zoopharmacognosy. And he's just written a foreword for my book, and saying how he was skeptical at first, but then, he took tiny steps, and now he's taking huge, large strides, and he just uses it completely. And he's just blown away with what he sees. And then, really exciting, I just got in before, got to share it with somebody, just got it in before your podcast. It was an email from Fred, and Fred Provenzo is the grandfather of self-medication. So he was the very first person who wrote the first paper on animal self-medication, and that was in the 70s. And he's just written a bit of blurb for my book, for the back cover.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic.
Consider him as the grandfather of self-medication. So I felt very honored, and it was lovely words too. So, it's nice to see the academic communities too now beginning to embrace it.
So do you think that... Sorry,
it's been a long road to get here.
Yeah.
But finally, and it's really, it's really exciting.
Do you think we've kind of gone full circle now? Many years ago, surely our ancestors would have self-medicated, and it would have been our natural instincts as humans to self-medicate, and then big pharma sort of pulling us away from self-medication maybe, and ending up going full circle now, and hopefully back to what our bodies actually need, and looking at our dogs with the same lens of what they need. And the choice side of things is something that we talk about regularly on the podcast. Without that choice, and being forced into a state of learned helplessness because their communication isn't being listened to, just removes any way that we're able to have that input from them.
Yeah, I definitely, animals definitely, this is such a natural survival instinct for them. Any animal that wasn't able to self-medicate, be it domestic or domesticated, would not have survived that evolutionary history. And it's such an important survival mechanism. They just wouldn't have made it here today. I think with humans, we are a little bit of both. We're innate with our with how we can self-medicate, like with me, with taste and smell. But we also learn socially too. So basically, and some primates work, and elephants work via social learning. So basically, we have conversation and language. And so we say to people, actually, this medicine is amazing. And I think, for stomach problems or headaches, and I think maybe that's where we've kind of lost that little bit of self-medication, because we automatically think because it's worked with one person's stomach ache, we might even have the same illness as the second person, that it's going to work for them. And so then we get disappointed when it doesn't. And I think with self-medication, what it does and why it sets it apart maybe from herbal medicine is because it's so finely tuned to the individual. So, okay, you've got a stomach ache, maybe with a fever. And then I'm going to offer you remedies, maybe 4 or 5 remedies that work with stomach aches and fevers, and see which one suits you and your body type. And then, or somebody might just have digestive problems or IBS. So then I offer them a selection of maybe 5 different remedies that are classically selected for that condition, and they match it to themselves. And I think that's where it might have got lost a little bit with humans, because we tend to say, well, it worked for one, and we prescribe instead of working with taste and smell. And then also, I always say to people, you get the right remedy and you're halfway there. It's the dosage after that. If you don't get the right dose or the right route of entry, is it going to be as effective? Like for me, massaged on my back, it wasn't strong enough. So it helped, but it didn't knock the UTI on the head. Or like us working with an elephant who was resistant, baby elephant, to antibiotics, to infection, and they were concerned about septicemia. And I'd never worked with an elephant before, so it was very, very nerve-wracking. I had worked with an elephant, but not internally for infection. I'd worked for loss and separation at the Sheldrick Trust. And then they called me out and said, look, she's not responding to antibiotics. She's got the worst wounds we've ever seen. We're concerned about septicemia. And she was desperate for garlic. And I thought, oh God, all the remedies. I knew how strong garlic was. And she was getting my hand, because she wanted it, dropped on my hand and sucked into her mouth. And I thought, I've got to trust in self-medication. So I trusted her. And some days she would have 2 meals. And on the days she was cleaned, she would have 5 meals. And she was only cleaned maybe on the 3rd and 6th day. And I think, why her wounds? Because she was put down on the ground. And I thought, why is she taking 5 meals when her wounds are cleaned, saline solution? And then it dawned on me that it was so stressful for her that her immune system would have dropped. And so the bacteria was taking hold. And so she needed more than twice as much garlic. Now, the vet confirmed that it saved her life in Africa. So if I had put my human cap on, that I'm really scared, and I think I'm only going to allow maybe a few drops, then she would have died. If I thought, I'm going to give her 5 meals, really knock it on the head, it would have been too much. I would have overdosed her and put her body under stress. Only she knew how much was needed. And if you look at the word pharmacy, it comes from the Greek word pharmakon. And if you translate pharmakon, it means medicine and poison. And that is exactly what the essential oils are. If they're not needed, they're going to be a toxin. Of course, they're medicine. And if they are needed, the body will utilize them and there'll be no ill effects, like with the caterpillar, like with the chimps who take Verenium and Magdalena, which is so poisonous it's called goat killer. So I think that, it's if we need medicine for our heart or any condition, we're going to, it might have side effects, but it's not going to, it's going to help us and hopefully not poison us. But if we take somebody else's medicine, it's going to poison us. And the same with the essential oils. And so that's why it's heartbreaking for me when I read bad press about essential oils, of people saying, oh, peppermint is poisonous or dangerous. And I'm thinking, where did you get that from? And, can you give me the science behind this? Can you give me any anecdotal evidence? How much was given? What route of application? What was the condition? What was the quality of the oil? And I think that's probably, I found the most upsetting on my journey really, is misinformation on the essential oils, because, and that includes birch and that includes garlic as well, because it's actually, those oils have really helped alleviate so much suffering. And if I was there, nobody wants to suffer. And if that animal needs it, they will select it safely. And there's never been an adverse reaction that I know of when an animal has selected an oil. Most of the adverse reactions we hear have been in experiments, or in, a cat was injected with lime oil, and that's an overdose. And when they've been overdosed, really, it's very little data. So that's something that I find. I've worked with so many cats that have selected birch and been able to be stroked again, and they select by inhalation. That's their dose. A horse very often takes it by mouth. That's their dose. That's their physiology. And a lot of people think that these cats get rehomed, they can be stroked again, they have a quality of life, and people are putting out misinformation when they don't know the subject. They don't know what they're talking about, and it's better just to say, I need to educate myself first before I put out this information, because actually I could be doing more harm than good. And it's valuable.
It's that key point about humility, which I wanted to underscore, saying that before. We can have our education, and it's very important that we do understand what the boundaries are to work with, have a little bit of intelligence to know to select the right group of oils. But really, after that, it's not about us saying you need this, therefore you have it. It's saying, show me what you require, let me facilitate that, and let me trust you that you know your body, and you'll know. And as long as I'm paying attention and looking for those signs and being responsive to then pack things away or to continue for a little bit longer, then we get these amazing results. But when we come in with that, well, I know what to do and I'm going to give it, then we miss it. And it's almost a betrayal then, I think, of the relationship, the trust that we have with our animal, because they were saying, oh, yeah, we're going to have a communication, we're going to work together on this. And then you come in and go, oh, actually, you know what? It's all about what I think. And they're like, oh,
exactly.
Okay, well, we're, back to this place where I don't get hurt.
Yeah. Now, I always say to people, it's really important, just be really present. You're not above your animal. They're pretty smart. You're equal. You're trying to help them. You're a team. You're working together and giving them choice. It's like we wouldn't like it if that choice was taken away from us. So let's treat them as the intelligent beings they are. And I just wanted to quickly add in about cats, just in case people think, oh, but cats don't have the enzymes to break down essential oils. They do. And it's been overlooked in science. A lot of people think because they don't have glucose transferase enzyme or have very little amounts, that they're incapable of breaking down essential oils. Well, this is the enzyme that most vertebrates use to break down certain medications and essential oils. Cats actually have something called glucose sedation, And actually they share that with insects and plants. And it breaks, and they have more of this enzyme than dogs and humans and horses, and it breaks down essential oils efficiently. And it's just they have a much less dose. Their diet isn't plants, and so their enzymatic physiology works beautifully with the oils they need with inhalation. However, if you force an oil on a cat or give a cat an oil that's not needed, it's going to be more detrimental than a horse, because a horse has got a lot of detoxification enzymes for plants because they're nibbling on plants all through the day. So, and they might have to take a few just for sustenance. But a cat typically, they're not needed, but they do. If a cat didn't have enzymes to break down essential oils, believe me, there'd be a lot of veterinary medicines that they wouldn't be able to break down as well. And
Liz, sorry.
Yes,
sorry,
no, cool.
Caroline. I was just going to say, Liz, they've got lovely Liz listening in who says, is this similar to back flower remedies, which I use all the time with myself and animals, especially rescue and shelter animals? We only use the ones we are drawn to. If we don't need it, it won't have any effect. That's a question. I missed the question.
Yeah, I think similar and not similar in many ways. I mean, similar in the methodology. You go with what you're drawn with. And it's like homeopathic remedies. They work with homeopathic remedies too beautifully, the animals, which I want to talk about more in my next book. And because it's all about self-selection. So be it back flower remedies, be it essential oils, be it homeopathy, that is the subject line is under, be it herbs. The only difference is really between a back flower remedy and homeopathy and the essential oils is that one is more energy medicine, and essential oils are really, really, they're probably the nearest substance you could probably get to allopathic medicine. They're really strong. As in, so it depends, and some individuals are more suited to working with energy medicine, and I'm not saying it's any less effective. They're just one end of the scale apart from each other. Is that have I said that properly?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Each end of the scale, but it's not to say, so with my dog, I mean, sometimes she would want to work with homeopathy, and sometimes she'd want to work with essential oils. And so, sometimes the essential oils couldn't get to places that homeopathy got to, and other times homeopathy. Other times the oils work better for her than homeopathy. So, but she knew. And so what I would do is I'd offer her, the essential oils, and she'd select what she needed. And I think when my light bulb moment with homeopathy was when, I got her really, really strong. She was a beautiful German Shepherd that I rescued at 6 years old, and she was very sort of sickly, and she'd been sort of shut in most of her life, but she was sweet. She was a really sweet dog. And she if she was a little out of sorts, she'd always choose some oils and put herself right, and it didn't take long. And if I ever touched her head and it was a little bit hot, I would offer her peppermint, which is cooling. She'd take peppermint and it'd fill the head and it's gone cold. But then she developed what German Shepherds develop is funculosis, that sort of lesions by the anal area. And I thought, well, the essential oils haven't got on top of this because she has the choice of essential oils whenever she needs them, and we've got this condition. And then I thought, well, it's a constitutional condition that German Shepherds have. Perhaps I need something that goes back into what I can't see. And essential homeopathy, goes into areas where you can't see. As essential oils seem very much with what happens in this life and very physical, even if it's emotional. But homeopathy seems to transcend sort of to that even deeper place, if that makes sense, sort of beyond this life that's taken through. And so I thought, okay, so I scrambled around because she was really uncomfortable, and I did have some homeopathic remedies, didn't know what I was doing, other than I knew to offer them, and she would select them. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. She'd breathe into the bottle, and it's just the way she did an essential oil, but you go really close. So, she'd work like this, and then she would just breathe so deeply. And I've got so much video of her doing this, and her eyes would drop, and she'd get all sleepy, and she'd look settled. And occasionally, I'd look it up afterwards and see what it was for on the computer. And then afterward, sometimes she'd want to take a couple, and then and I'd put it on a saucer. Sometimes she wouldn't, and then I called up my friend Tim Cousins, who's a vet, a homeopathic vet, and I said, "My God, you're not going to believe it. She's selecting her homeopathic remedies, and she's got this condition." He said, "You need gunpowder." So I said, "Okay." So he sent some in the post, and I offered her gunpowder, and she just recoiled from it as if it was a really strong essential oil. And I thought, my God, it doesn't even smell. And I thought, she must need it to have that reaction, but she obviously doesn't need it now. And so I waited a couple of days, continued working with her other remedies, and it came to be her go-to remedy. It's almost like she needed to work on other layers first before she was ready. And that can happen with the oils too, before she was ready for the gunpowder. And it totally cured her of this condition. And I had a really super healthy, healthy German Shepherd. But what was also interesting, I was very excited to tell Chris Day as well. So Chris Day was the godfather of homeopathic medicine for animals. I mean, he sadly departed this world. But I called him up and I said, "Chris, I'm just so excited because Lexi is selecting her own remedies. And sometimes with rose quartz, she actually wants to take quite a lot of them, more than 2. And I thought, I'm not going to keep in with the rule book because I never do that. I give the rules to her." And I said, "But what's really fascinating is I've got sepia from one brand and sepia from another, and then another homeopathic remedy from one brand and the same one from another." And I said, "She won't choose one brand." And he said, "Can I just ask you, Caroline, are those remedies in plastic?" And I said, "Yeah, they are." She wouldn't select any homeopathic remedies in plastic. Isn't that cool?
Wow.
It's amazing. So this whole thing, it's sort of bigger than just the oils. I mean, the oils are my experience and what I know and what I've had results with, but I'm finding it and certain herbal powders and nutrients. But it's very exciting, sort of even expanding this animal self-medication to other modalities as well.
Oh, it really is.
Love it in the stories that you've shared is that we can see that it is not just a chimpanzee famous for their intelligence and higher processing skills and so forth. It's not just adult animals that have grown up and have learned amount of time, to do. It's the babies. They already know it when they're babies. They already know it when they're a caterpillar. So again, check your ego and come in and be humble when you're working with your animals, because they have that skill set just waiting to be unlocked, just waiting for you to turn up with, whether it's oils or homeopathy or Bach flower essences, but something that gives them the choice to say, "Oh, I've been waiting for that. I needed that."
It's very respectful.
Absolutely. It really is, and that autonomy is just so key.
And I think the vet in his foreword for my book, he said, it's such a gentle, respectful discipline that it's and it's so powerful at the same time. There is a skill involved, but once you get the hang of that, and especially with your own dog, it's a whole nother thing, I think, taking on other people's animals. But I think where I'd like to go now more than anything really is empowering the person at home to be able to look after their own dog, because one, I think it's healthy to empower people, and also it gives that beautiful communication. And we all know when something goes wrong, it's always at the weekend, isn't it? or when you can't get hold of anyone, or it's at midnight, 9 o'clock at night. And if you have that skill set and you have those remedies, your hands aren't tied, you can do something. And I feel that, that's something, and, you were saying, have we lost a lot of this? And I think that's one thing we really have lost. Our grandparents had that wonderful freedom of, or our great grandparents, of being able to use these remedies and pass it down. And now we're not even allowed to say in the latest veterinary instructions, we're not even allowed to say something supports something, like barley grass supports well-being. It's just come out in the guidelines, and it's like, really what's going on. Veterinary medicine have their place, but so does holistic and natural remedies. And I think there's room for both. And I think to take out one or to try and control one completely is, taking something away that we've had since time began. Really, veterinary medicines are new, whereas the work here is the original. It's been in existence since time began. Self-medication, and I just think, it's. I don't think it's a good idea to clamp down on it too hard. And also, I think animals deserve that right to natural remedies. Somebody wrote into me and said, they were writing off to the RCVS and copied me into the letter and said, the National Health System really support people using holistic remedies, but the veterinary establishment, it's very much a closed door, and their argument is animals can't choose. Well, here we see they can choose very clearly, and there's a lot of papers on that. But also, we choose for our children as well. It's no different in taking our dog to, an acupuncturist as it is our child. Our child doesn't have that say. We take the child, or if that person is compromised in some way or vulnerable, they don't have the choice, but we can still take them to alternative practitioners, and that's very much embraced for people. But it's so sad to think that the animals have that restricted, and they need it so much, because it just suits their physiology, probably even more so than us.
It does, and they've unfortunately become the victim of the artificial lifestyle that we have, in their natural setting, in a more wild environment, in somewhere where they're just spending a considerable more time in nature even. They're so much less toxic and less exposed to the things that are beginning that inflammation process, bringing in those disease weaknesses into the body. So if we are able to rewild their lifestyle in these ways, giving them more access to nature, giving them the chance to choose some things when they're on a walk, go for a safari that is also including a tasting session, right? And give them the time rather than go, come on, dog, we've got to get to the end of the walk. Then we're giving them the space to detoxify naturally just by being outside, but receive their own medicine under their own steam. But in that artificial space, the need elevates so much more than it does, typically speaking, in the more wild setting. So we have a responsibility to be ensuring that their health is maintained and not allow these diseases to take foot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, I knew that we would be talking and I would never want it to stop. And we are running out of time, but we did put a date in the diary for May where we're going to welcome you back onto the podcast. The only guest, apart from Penny, who we've had to book a second podcast episode in for before we even had the first one. Because we knew how much we needed to hear what you've got to share. And if anyone is in any doubt over whether what we've been discussing goes hand in hand with veterinary practice, just have a look at carolineingraham.com and go to the images of the dog with the ear that Caroline shared about on this podcast episode and see the progress images of the recovery, which is absolutely incredible. I think it was by day 3, it was already really noticeable, the healing in that ear. So, and that dog was not going to heal. Everything had broken down from a veterinary perspective. So it's really important that we don't rule this out, and we make sure that we not only educate ourselves but help our clients to explore finding out more about this. Now, if you go on to Caroline's website, carolineingraham.com, and scroll down a little bit on the home page, you'll see there's a button there that you can click to register to be one of the first to be made aware when Caroline's new book, which is very nearly out, comes out.
I've got a new website for that. It's
Oh,
called
have you?
ingrahambooks.com.
Oh, exciting.
And you can, and people can pre-buy it at a 15% discount. So that's
amazing.
all running.
Fantastic. And will you share with the listeners a little bit about the courses that you run as well, please, Caroline?
Oh, yeah. So at the minute, we've got module 1 and 2, which are really to help help you understand more about the subject, and also understand why it's much easier to work with essential oils than perhaps other plants, because they're the oldest plants on this planet, and they've been around since the planet's before the continents divided. So all animals evolved with them, so they can recognize them. They learned to utilize these plants for their own health benefits, essential oil bearing plants, and so they can recognize them. That's why they're so easy to work with, and they can detoxify them. And then explains why there might be problems with some other plants, and there's always a reason. And that's all in the course, but also a lot on how to work with different dogs, more on dogs than cats and horses, just because there's so many different breeds, and that's going to make it a little bit more, there's going to be more variation. And the second part of the modules is about more about the essential oils and how they work.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Caroline, for joining us this evening. We'll look forward to welcoming you back in May, and thank you to everyone who's listened in. We'll look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you as well.
Bye. Bye, Penny.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Dog Expert podcast, the podcast dogs would want you to listen to. If you've enjoyed this episode, do come and let us know in our free Facebook group for dog lovers everywhere, Ethical Dog Training with Canine Principles. That way we can make more content like this that you'll love. We would love for you to leave a review on here and hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode.